Some memories fade over time, but this one never did. It's burned into my mind like a scar. The cold sand beneath my feet, the rhythmic crash of the waves, the way the air changed, like the entire beach was holding its breath. It was just past midnight. The boardwalk was empty, the wooden planks groaning under my steps. Peaceful in a way, but wrong. Too quiet. Like the ocean itself was waiting for something. Then I saw them. Footprints in the sand. Fresh. Leading under the boardwalk. I looked around, expecting to see someone nearby. But the beach was deserted. And that's when I realized the footprints only went one way. Whoever left them never came back out. I was staying in a small beach town for the summer. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place where people came to relax, fish, and enjoy the ocean breeze. I'd been there a few times before with my family, but this year I had more freedom. Most nights I'd take a walk alone just to clear my head. The boardwalk was always my favorite spot. Old wooden planks stretching along the shore, the scent of salt and seaweed in the air. It was peaceful, at least during the day. At night it felt different. The tourists disappeared. The waves sounded louder. And the boardwalk, once full of life, became an empty skeleton of itself. The few locals I talked to always said the same thing: don't go near the boardwalk after dark. They never explained why, just shook their heads and muttered something about weird things happening. I didn't believe in ghost stories. I wasn't the type to scare easily. But that night, I should have listened. That night, the beach was completely empty. No voices, no footsteps, just the sound of waves crashing against the shore. I walked along the boardwalk like I always did, hands in my pockets, breathing in the salty air. Then I heard it, a faint shuffling noise behind me. I stopped, listening. The wind? A stray animal? Maybe some other late-night walker? I turned around, nothing. Just the dim glow of the streetlights reflecting off the wooden planks. I kept walking, but the uneasy feeling stuck with me. That's when I noticed something strange. In the sand beneath the boardwalk, a set of footprints trailed off into the darkness. They looked fresh, but there was no one there. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone had walked there earlier. But as I took another step, my foot suddenly caught on a loose plank. My keys slipped from my hand. I watched in horror as they tumbled through a gap in the boardwalk, vanishing into the darkness below. Great. Just what I needed. Sighing, I crouched down, peering through the cracks. The space under the boardwalk was almost pitch black, but I could make out the faint glint of metal in the sand. My keys were just out of reach. I had no choice. I had to go down there. I climbed down carefully, my shoes sinking into the cold, damp sand. Under the boardwalk, everything felt different. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of rotting seaweed, and something else. Something foul. I hesitated, my phone's flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. The wooden beams above me creaked softly as if the weight of something unseen pressed down on them. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my ears. My keys were right there, half buried in the sand. I crouched down, fingers brushing against something rough, a broken seashell. That's when I heard it. A faint rustling. Not the wind. Not the ocean. Something else. I froze, holding my breath. The sound came again, a slow shift of movement somewhere deeper under the boardwalk. I turned my flashlight towards it, the beam of light shaking in my unsteady grip. Nothing. Just shadows stretching against the wooden pillars. Exhaling, I reached for my keys. But as I did, my stomach clenched. The sand around them had shifted. Someone, or something, had covered them. A chill ran through me. My hands trembled as I brushed the sand away. My fingers closed around the cold metal. Then I saw it. A handprint. Pressed deep into the wet sand. Fresh. And it wasn't mine. I stopped breathing. The handprint was fresh. Too fresh. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just my own? Maybe I brushed the sand in a weird way? But deep down I knew. It wasn't mine. The silence under the boardwalk was suffocating. No wind. No waves. Just the heavy weight of something unseen, something waiting. Slowly I turned my flashlight toward the wooden beams. Shadows twisted around them, stretching into the darkness. My pulse pounded in my throat as I scanned the area, but nothing moved. Then, just as I reached for my keys, I noticed something. The sand around them, it had shifted again. Like someone had just pushed a little more over them. A slow, sick realization crept through me. Someone was here, watching me, close enough to touch. I swallowed hard. Hello. My voice barely came out, hoarse and unsteady. Silence. The flashlight flickered slightly as I adjusted my grip. My hand was shaking now. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just my imagination. I reached down, grabbed my keys, and a breath. Oh, raspy. Right behind me. The kind of exhale that isn't accidental. The kind that's meant to be heard. My entire body locked up. The breath was right behind me. Not the wind. Not my imagination. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my grip. Nothing. Just endless shadows stretching beneath the boardwalk. The wooden beams. The damp sand. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, drowning out the distant waves. I took a step back, and then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft. Careful. Mimicking mine. Not an echo. Someone was moving when I moved. My breath hitched. The flashlight wavered as I turned it toward the deepest part of the shadows. That's when I saw it. A shape. Crouched. Hunched. Hidden between the beams. Not an animal. Not driftwood. A person. Or something pretending to be one. A sharp jolt of fear shot through me. My instinct screamed, run. But my body wasn't listening. Then, a hand. Fingers, thin, ice-cold, wrapped around my ankle. I gasped, stumbling. The grip tightened, nails pressing into my skin. My flashlight dropped, rolling into the sand. I kicked. Hard. The grip didn't loosen. I kicked again, harder this time, my heel slamming into something solid. A low grunt. A sound of pain, human but wrong. And then release. I didn't wait. I lunged forward, scrambling through the sand, grabbing my flashlight. My breath came in ragged gasps as I twisted around, shining it back one last time. That's when I saw its face. Pale. Hollow. Eyes sunken, staring straight at me. Mouth slightly open, as if it had been breathing against my skin. I ran. I ran harder than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop running until I reached my house. My legs burned, my chest ached, but I didn't dare look back. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my keys. I nearly dropped them, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, the lock turned. I shoved the door open and slammed it shut behind me. I stood there, shaking, my back pressed against the wood. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might burst. I wasn't safe. Not really. I stumbled into the living room, calling for my parents. My voice cracked. They found me pale, sweating, still shaking. I told them everything. The whispers. The footprints. The thing under the boardwalk. The hand that grabbed me. They exchanged glances. My dad sighed. My mom placed a hand on my shoulder, her expression soft but doubtful. You probably imagined it, sweetheart, she said gently. It was dark. Your mind played tricks on you. I pulled up my pant leg. A bruise. Deep, ugly, shaped like fingers. My parents fell silent. But they still didn't believe me. That night I barely slept. Every creak in the house, every rustle outside the window made my stomach twist. I kept seeing that face in my mind. Pale. Hollow. Watching. Days passed. I tried to convince myself it was over. Maybe it really was just some crazy person living under the boardwalk. Maybe I got lucky. Then 3 nights later, a knock at the door. Soft. Almost hesitant. I froze. It was late. Way too late for visitors. I crept toward the peephole, my breath shallow. My fingers tingled as I reached for the lock. But when I looked outside, no one was there. Just the empty porch. The quiet street. And on the doormat, placed neatly in the center, a shoelace. Mine. The one I lost under the boardwalk. I slammed the door and locked it. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My mind screamed for explanations, but none of them made sense. I never went near the boardwalk at night again. I never even walked that way in daylight. But something, or someone, remembers me. And it still knows where I live. I've never told anyone this before, but I made a mistake that nearly got me killed. It happened on a quiet boardwalk late at night, one of those moments where you think you're alone, until you realize you're not. I used to take night walks to clear my mind, listening to the waves and enjoying the silence. That night felt no different, at first. The air was cool, the ocean stretched into darkness, and the boardwalk was empty. Peaceful. But something was off. I felt it before I even understood why. Maybe it was the way the wooden planks creaked behind me, like someone was stepping exactly where I just walked. Maybe it was the unnatural stillness, as if the world had paused, waiting for something to happen. Then I saw it, a single shoe placed neatly in the middle of the boardwalk. And that's when everything went wrong. I was staying in a small beach town for a few weeks, the kind of place where everything shut down early. During the day, the boardwalk was full of families, couples, and tourists. But at night, it was different. Empty. Almost too quiet. I liked walking there alone. It felt peaceful, like the world had shrunk to just me and the ocean. I never felt unsafe, until that night. Locals had weird stories about the boardwalk. Some talked about people disappearing, others swore they'd heard whispers under the wooden planks when no one was there. I always thought it was just small-town superstition. That night, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just walking lost in thought. But I made a mistake, one that I can never take back. Because when I saw that shoe, I stopped. I hesitated. And I made the worst decision of my life. The night was too quiet. No waves crashing, no wind rustling the wooden planks, no distant laughter from late-night beachgoers. Just silence. The kind that makes your skin prickle. A single streetlight flickered ahead, casting long, distorted shadows on the boardwalk. Every step I took echoed, but something about the sound felt off. Then I heard it. Soft shuffling behind me. Faint, almost hesitant. I stopped. So did the sound. I turned around, scanning the empty boardwalk. Nothing. No one. Just rows of dark, empty shops with their metal shutters pulled down. I told myself it was nothing. Just my mind playing tricks on me. I kept walking, faster this time, until something up ahead made me freeze. A shoe. A single, worn-out sneaker, sitting perfectly in the middle of the boardwalk. Placed there like someone wanted me to see it. Something about it felt wrong. I should have kept walking. Should have ignored it. But I didn't. I hesitated, staring at the shoe. It looked damp, like it had been pulled from the ocean, its laces tangled and stiff with salt. Why was it here? I glanced around, expecting someone to claim it, but the boardwalk was empty. The silence stretched, thick and unnatural. Then snap. The streetlight behind me flickered once and went out. My breath hitched. I told myself it was just old wiring. Just a coincidence. But then I heard it. A slow, deliberate step. Not behind me. Under me. The wooden planks vibrated ever so slightly, as if someone was shifting their weight beneath the boardwalk. A creeping unease crawled up my spine. I stepped back, my sneaker scuffing against the wood. The shoe sat motionless in front of me, daring me to move it. I swallowed hard and crouched down. My fingers brushed against the damp fabric. The moment I touched it, the air changed. The silence became deafening. The humidity thickened, pressing against my skin. And then, breathing. Not mine. Not distant. Close. Right beside me. I shot up, heart hammering, my eyes darting to the gaps between the wooden planks. Nothing but darkness. But something was there. Watching. Waiting. And I had just made a mistake. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped away from the shoe. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. I forced myself to breathe, straining my ears. Silence. Then creak. The boardwalk shifted. A slow, dragging sound, like something was pulling itself forward underneath me. I spun around, shining my phone's flashlight at the wooden planks. Nothing. Just darkness. Just creak. Closer. A gust of cold air brushed against my ankle. I stumbled back, swallowing a yelp. Something was down there. Something that knew I was here. I gritted my teeth and forced myself to move. Step by step, faster, faster, until I was practically jogging. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Perfectly in sync with mine. I stopped. So did they. I took one slow step. The unseen presence did the same. It wasn't a coincidence. I wasn't alone. Panic coiled in my chest. My fingers trembled as I gripped my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, when I heard something that nearly made me drop it. A low exhale. Right behind me. I turned so fast I nearly tripped over myself. There was no one there. But then I saw it. The shoe. Right where I had been standing seconds ago. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The shoe was right behind me. I hadn't dropped it, I was sure of that. But there it was. I backed away slowly, my breath shaky. Then creak. Not beneath me this time. Behind me. Something was there. Watching. Waiting. I bolted. My feet slammed against the wooden planks as I sprinted toward the exit. The boardwalk stretched endlessly ahead, every step feeling slower, heavier, like I was running through water. But I wasn't running alone. The footsteps behind me picked up speed, matching mine. Not human footsteps. Too fast. Too light. Too unnatural. I dared to glance over my shoulder. Nothing. Just empty space. But the footsteps were still there. I ran harder, lungs burning, legs shaking. I could see the boardwalk's exit now. Just a little further. A little. A shadow moved. From the alley between two buildings, something lunged. A hand grabbed my arm. Ice-cold fingers dug into my skin. I screamed and fought, thrashing, kicking wildly. The grip tightened, then suddenly let go. I stumbled forward, nearly falling. Panting, I turned back. Nothing. No one. Just the alley. Dark. Still. Silent. I clutched my arm, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The bruises were already forming. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't alone. I didn't stop running until I was inside my house, slamming the door shut behind me. My fingers fumbled with the locks. 1, 2, 3. I pressed my back against the wood, chest heaving, ears straining for any sound outside. Silence. I stood there for minutes, maybe longer, waiting. But nothing came. Finally, I forced myself to move. My arm ached. I pulled up my sleeve and my stomach turned, dark bruises shaped like fingers. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, but my body told a different story. Something had grabbed me. Something real. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house made my skin crawl. Shadows stretched strangely across the walls, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. But morning came, and with it the illusion of safety. I convinced myself it was over. Until 2 nights later. A knock at the door. Not loud. Just a soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap. I froze. It was almost midnight. Who the hell knocks at someone's door at this hour? Another knock. I crept toward the peephole, heart hammering. Slowly, carefully, I looked. No one was there. My breath came shallow and uneven. My fingers hovered over the lock, but something stopped me from opening it. Then I noticed it, right on my welcome mat. A shoe. The same damn shoe. I didn't open the door. I didn't step outside. I just stood there staring at that shoe, my whole body frozen in cold, creeping dread. I never went back to the boardwalk at night again. I never should have touched that shoe. But whatever left it there hasn't forgotten me. People love boardwalks, bright lights, ocean breeze, laughter in the air. But when the crowd is gone, when it's just you and the empty wooden planks stretching into darkness, it feels different. Like something else is out there just waiting. That night I wasn't alone. I thought I was, but I wasn't. I still remember the sound of the waves, the dim glow of the street lights, the distant hum of music from a bar shutting down. It was peaceful at first. Then the peace faded, replaced by something unnatural, something watching. I should have turned back the moment I felt it. But I made a mistake. I looked too closely. I stepped too far. And now, even miles away, even in daylight, I know, it never really let me go. I was in a quiet beach town just passing through. A solo trip meant to clear my head. I spent my days at cafes, my evenings by the ocean, and my nights wandering the boardwalk. People told me it was safe, but locals had an unspoken rule: don't stay too late. Some laughed it off, calling it superstition. Others just said, things change after midnight. I thought they meant crime, maybe drunks causing trouble. I never imagined it was something else. That night I couldn't sleep. I left my motel, craving fresh air, and found myself on the boardwalk again. The usual crowd was gone, the bars were closing, and only a few distant figures remained. A street musician sat under a flickering lamp, playing an old tune on a violin. His case was empty, no money, no belongings. Just him and that eerie, broken melody. As I passed him, he stopped mid-note, looked right at me. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough. Something shifted in the air. I kept walking, shaking off the unease. The ocean stretched out beside me, dark and endless, but something felt off. The waves were moving, but I couldn't hear them anymore. I glanced back at the street musician. He was gone. Ahead, the boardwalk stretched into the distance, empty except for a single figure standing beneath a flickering streetlight. At first, I thought it was just another late-night wanderer. But they weren't moving. Not shifting their weight, not checking their phone, just standing perfectly still, facing me. A strange sensation crawled up my spine, the kind of instinctive fear you feel when something isn't right. I slowed my steps. The light above them buzzed and flickered, casting shadows that made their shape hard to define. I hesitated. Maybe I should turn around. But then the figure moved. Not walked, moved. One moment they were several yards away. The next they were closer. Just standing there, the same unnatural stillness, but nearer than before. My pulse hammered. I took a step back. The streetlight flickered again, and suddenly there was another figure. Behind me. Identical. Standing the same way. Perfectly still. I was trapped. I could feel my breath quicken, my skin prickling with something colder than fear, recognition. The two figures, one ahead, one behind, stood in eerie silence. Their outlines flickered under the weak glow of the streetlight, their features blurred like a bad reflection. I swallowed hard. "Hello." My voice sounded small, swallowed by the air. No response. I took a shaky step forward. The figure ahead didn't move. The one behind didn't either. Then they both tilted their heads at the exact same time. A perfect, unnatural synchronization. Like a mirror. My stomach twisted. I turned my phone's flashlight on, aiming it at the nearest figure. The second the light hit it, my screen glitched. Lines ran through the display, distorting my reflection like static on an old TV. I dropped my phone in shock. The light above buzzed, flickered, and suddenly the figure was closer. Just there. No footsteps, no motion. Just closer. I spun around, the other one had closed the distance too. They were me. Their faces were my face. Their clothes matched mine, but distorted, like something had tried to copy me and got the details slightly wrong. One of them raised a hand to its face and peeled the skin back. The skin stretched, tearing away like wet paper, revealing a gaping, empty darkness beneath. I ran. I bolted down the boardwalk, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The wooden planks rattled under my feet, but there was no other sound, no footsteps chasing me. But I knew they were following. I could feel them. The boardwalk felt wrong now. Stretched longer, the buildings warping in my peripheral vision. The street musician was gone. The flickering lights above me had stopped buzzing. The ocean. There was no sound from the ocean. I skidded to a stop, heart hammering in my chest. The waves should have been crashing against the shore, but the water was silent. Frozen. As if the whole world had been muted. Then I saw it. A storefront window reflecting the empty boardwalk behind me. Except, it wasn't empty. In the glass, the two figures stood motionless just a few feet away, closer than before. But when I turned around, the boardwalk was still empty. I whipped back to the reflection. They were staring at me. Smiling. My chest tightened. My own face grinned at me from inside the glass, lips stretching too wide. Then, it raised a hand. Slowly. Pressing against the inside of the glass. My breath caught. The handprint appeared on the real window. Not inside the reflection, on the actual glass. The barrier between us was breaking. I stumbled back, but the second my foot hit the wood, the reflection blinked. And then, from just behind me, a breath. Not mine. I spun around, my stomach twisting into a knot. Nothing. But I knew something was there. The silence pressed against my ears like a thick fog. No wind. No ocean. Just my own breath, uneven and ragged. Then a creak. A slow, deliberate step on the wooden planks behind me. I turned just in time to see a shadow lurch forward from the corner of my eye. I ran. The boardwalk stretched ahead, but the buildings didn't look right anymore. Their edges blurred, their doors shifting in and out of focus. Like the whole place was changing around me. I didn't care, I just needed to get away. Another footstep. Faster now. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning, but I could feel it. Something was right behind me. Then, out of nowhere, a door. It was wedged between two buildings, barely visible in the dim light. It hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. But something told me this was my only way out. Without thinking, I lunged for the handle and shoved it open. And just like that, I wasn't on the boardwalk anymore. Blinding daylight flooded my vision. People. Laughter. Music. I staggered forward, gasping, heart hammering in my chest. The boardwalk was full of people again. The ocean roared in the distance. Seagulls squawked overhead. It was daytime. I turned around, searching for the door I had just come through, but it was gone. Just a blank wooden wall where it had been. I swore under my breath, gripping my knees, trying to catch my breath. Had I imagined all of it? Then I caught movement in the reflection of a nearby store window. A figure, standing still. And it wasn't facing me. It was watching me from inside the glass. I stumbled back from the window, my breath caught in my throat. The reflection, it wasn't right. People walked past me, their images mirrored normally in the glass. But mine? It just stood there, still, unmoving, watching me. I turned my head left. The reflection didn't. I lifted my hand, nothing. The longer I stared, the more the panic clawed at my chest. That wasn't me. My own reflection wasn't mine anymore. A flicker of movement, it smiled. A slow, deliberate curl of the lips. I staggered backward, bumping into someone. "Hey, you okay?" A voice, real and solid, snapped me back. I spun around, a stranger looking at me like I was crazy. I forced a nod, mumbling something, anything, as I turned away. My body was trembling. I needed to get away from that window. From that thing. But as I walked through the boardwalk crowd, I felt it. That same suffocating feeling from before. Like I was still being watched. I glanced at another window. Then another. Everywhere, every reflective surface, it was there. Not copying me. Not following my movements. Standing completely still. Watching. It was waiting. And somehow I knew it wasn't trapped in there forever. I left the boardwalk that day, but it never really left me. Sometimes I catch glimpses of it. Not the boardwalk, the other version. The one I was never supposed to escape. In reflections, in glass windows, in darkened TV screens, it's always there. Still. Waiting. And sometimes, just for a split second, it moves before I do.